Good evening. I'm audible, I'm visible. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you, Syed. Good evening, good evening. So, welcome to the last class of World History. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'll tell you, Chandrajyoti, I'll tell you the strategy today. Today, we have to finish the module which is colonization, decolonization. Once we've covered that, we will go towards, yes, we'll do previous year questions. And thereafter, we will also uh, move to discuss strategy plus module coverage, meaning what to do in each and every module. What to do in each and every module. This is the basic point. Okay. So colonization, decolonization, previous year question, strategy plus module coverage is the basic thing. Today is our last class, 10th module, and this module is interesting for a very simple reason, because it's a standalone module and has a very different set of issues in that regard, which is that we will go back to where we started, which is the colonization concept and colonies itself. I'm waiting for everybody to join in and facing problems writing interview. I'll tell you the Pratyaksh what to do with interview. I have to very simply close everything. This is a very long module. No, it's not a one class module. It is, see, here we will understand what is imperialism and colonialism. Then we'll talk about Africa, but because Africa has got saturated as a question wise area, we don't expect a question. And then we'll discuss Indochina, which is nothing but Vietnam in that sense. So very simply, we will discuss an introduction. Pratyaksh, don't worry. So colonization, decolonization, previous year question, strategy, module coverage. These are the basic things we cover. Last week, or this, not even last week, on Saturday, we were able to finish the World War II plus Cold War module. And hereafter, we will go forward with regards to understanding this standalone module. This is standalone. As I told you, 1 to 4 are standalone, which is American Revolution, French Revolution, Industrial Revolution, and the concept of unification of Germany and Italy. Then 5 to 9 are connected to each other, which is from road to First World War till Cold War. And then 10 is again standalone. Today, I will tell you what to do with each and every module in that regard. So don't have to worry in that sense. But it is colonization, decolonization, previous year questions, strategy plus module coverage. This is the agenda for today. Africa used to be a very favorite area from which questions used to come. But now UPSC has abandoned this topic totally, has not been there for the past 7 to 8 years. Indochina is an insurance policy, which I'll tell you why it is. Before we do that, before I start, 7th October, which is Saturday, from 8 to 11:30 a.m., we'll have our doubt session. And the doubt session will be taking up questions which you send via IAS Live @byju's.com. And in this email, you have to keep the subject line. In the subject, keep it world history doubts or world history doubt session, so that the team can very simply take out all the questions and no question will be taken outside what has been emailed to us. So you have to send an email saying world history doubt. You have a week to assess what to do with this course generally, and thereafter we will see. So yeah, we'll see what to do with these questions. So the questions which are coming here, separate issue altogether. This is a specific doubt session for you, and for that you have to articulate yourself over email. And as I said, email tagline like this will be better. Doubt session, 7th October, Saturday. Just repeating, 7th October, Saturday, 8 to 11:30 a.m. Have to send your email via the islive@byju's.com platform, which is just to put this into your URL, or what we call as email to, and thereafter keep the subject as world history doubts or doubt. This is the first thing. Second, that by 7:30 ish, I think you will get the feedback form for this course itself. So do fill that up also and send it back to the team as per your understanding. So 2 to 3 things, very straightforward. We have covered 1 to 9. 1 to 9 are the heavier topics, the heavier themes generally. Now, this is a very, very interesting, but because we as India were colonized, we understand it well, because the story remains the same wherever you go. So colonization, be it decolonization, remains the same. The story remains the same. So first, we'll try to cover whatever is left. Thereafter, we'll go into previous year questions. I'll tell you how to write introductions, what to do with world history generally, what should be your strategy. And last but not the least, we will discuss the most important point, which is in which module what should be emphasized on. So good evening to all of you. Can we begin our analysis then? Can we start our last module and finish everything? Yes? Chandrajyoti, you are stretching it in the sense that it will be mere coincidence. Mere coincidence. Okay. Now, before we start to talk about case studies, I have Monica. See, you have to send your answers to islive@byju's.com only. If you send me the question and answers, the practice questions, I would have it in my email, but I cannot generate a ticket with it. So you have to go through the proper channel. It will come to me from that channel. It takes 4 to 5 days to check questions. That is the standard time it will take, right? Okay. Now, our course started with a very important question, which is, why did the Europeans have the courage to cross the Atlantic and find the new world in a way? And the first word which I used with you was colonization, which is that it is to colonize so as to have those God glory and the concept of gold resources, glory for the king, and conversion for the Catholic Church. So, in a way, we come full circle. In a way, we come full circle because the first module started with this question, or your course started with this question of colonization. And today we are discussing this module again. This is 10th module, yes. Discussing this module again vis-a-vis understanding what is the theoretical basis for colonization. And there are two words which are there. One is called imperialism and the other one is called colonialism. Now, when we talk about imperialism and colonialism, these two words are sometimes used as synonyms, but basically they are very different to each other. And in a way, they are also complementary to each other and are part of a larger process. Now, you tell me first, which comes first, colonialism or imperialism? Colonialism, imperialism, colonialism, imperialism, colonialism, imperialism, colonialism. So it's a mixed bag. Okay, mixed bag. Very good. See, this is first stage and this is second stage. And now you need to understand how are they related to each other. Imperialism is domination or indirect control for concessions from a foreign country the most important question or this most important word here is domination and indirect. Very simply, the exploiter does not take full control of polity, economy, and most important, and especially society. Does not take. And very simply, all countries which got colonized first had imperialism. And imperialism is the first step to colonialism, wherein direct control over a foreign nation or area, political, economic, social changes to suit the mother country. So this word mother country and colony, that is why it's called colonization, which is the process of creating colonies. Now, to give you a very simple, straightforward example, I'll give you an analogy and it should basically make it clear. So, if you've ever been to the mall in the past 2 to 3 years or to any public space where there are children, you would have seen those battery operated cars in which children sit. Have you seen that? Small cars in which the children sit. Now, that is a very good analogy for imperialism. The child is sitting in the car. And he is using the steering. And the child thinks that he is steering. However, if you will pay attention, there would be an operator, a person who's just behind that car with a small remote and controlling that car. This is imperialism, wherein the person who is sitting in the car feels that he is under control. So it's like a GPS. It is telling you where to go, but you are driving it. But it is telling you where to go. And the same way, there's a false sense of control which you have. Why? In imperialism, see, because colonialism is very messy, a lot of investment is needed, a lot of time is needed. If your interest is served by just dominating that country, imperialism is good enough. And Lenin said that imperialism is the highest form of capitalism, which is that capitalism is so hungry that imperialism is inbuilt into it, which is that industrial revolution cannot survive without colonies. Now, colonization is the easiest which is that you start with imperialism and thereafter you start to then take control of polity, then you start to take control of the society, then you start to play with the economy. Economy is changed in imperialism, but you change it for them under domination. Here, their apparatus changes everything. So, the best example would be India, for example. India went through both phases. For India, the imperialistic phase generally, we believe, is from the period between 1613 to 1765, which is that from getting farmans, from dominating the different policies, to getting the Diwani rights. With getting the Diwani rights, we went into the colonization phase. But in more nuanced books, we believe that it is only after 1830 that the British started to change their stance fully. So it is after the Maratha and the Mysore and the Carnatic. It is after basically the battles with the Sikhs when they've reached North India that we believe that the indirect control concept is going away. And there are two very interesting tools which were used by the British for imperialism. Can anybody tell me that two tools? Give me the first tool itself. What was used as an imperialistic tool? Very interesting tool, you know it, but I want to check if you know it as a form of imperialism. Very good, Sai. Very good, very good. Not Farman, not trading, not dual role, not Magna Carta, not proxy states. Yes, Pushpendra, very good. Not zamindars, not Diwani rights, that is full control. Not divide and rule, not trade, not deindustrialization, not blue waters policy. Blue waters policy is Portuguese, not British. Requesting for little, yes, very good, Devansh. Second thing you told me. White man's burden, advanced weapon, owned weaponry, war, diplomacy, Farman. Yes, Dhanraj, very good. Very good, Ravi. Yes. Subsidiary alliance and then doctrine of lapse. Subsidiary and doctrine of lapse. Till subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lapse are at play, the British don't want to get into the mud of India and change it. But after 1857 for sure, and basically after 1830, this is the transitionary phase. After 1857, obviously we went into proper colonialism, proper apparatus-based colonialism. But what we believe is the cutoff date of this is Bentinck. Why Bentinck? Can you tell me why Bentinck? Why William Bentinck? It's not company rule and town rule. It's not that. Heard of utilitarians? Not Redford. Utilitarians you heard. Have you heard of the concept utilitarianism? Yes. When the utilitarians dominate the Anglicans, the utilitarians dominate the Orientalists, which is once Macaulay's minute comes through and Bentinck starts to apply, we believe that India is moving from imperialism to colonialism. And the biggest tick or the biggest indicator of colonialism is sati. Before that, female infanticide, which is that very simply, or forticide, infanticide. The point is, once the British start to play with the society, they have now gone into the second phase. So once these utilitarian officers come through, we believe that fully we've moved from imperialism to colonialism. We'll have this discussion in modern India as by the end of this year. You will get 2 chances with me to do it. I think the morning evening batch and weekend batch, separate show altogether. But I'm trying to just connect the dots so that you can understand it in your way, because you know modern India better than world history. So I'll recap what I've done till this point, but I'll now write them in two different boxes. You have imperialism. Is this making sense to everyone? Come on. Are you able to understand the concepts, how they are basically first stage, second stage, how they are related to each other? Yes. Okay. Now imperialism is domination, indirect rule. It is to get concessions or dominate trade. And you know a very good example of imperialism, which is mercantilism. Mercantilism is a subtype of imperialism, wherein you dominate trade. Dominate trade via military power or force. And when we talk about imperialism, one thing is very, very clear, very clear, that we'll talk about that, Saurabh, that it's a very old concept. Romans and Greeks used it, and it can be done for political or economic reasons. While on the other hand, you have colonialism, which is direct control, rule through own apparatus or administrative machinery. Colonialism was not a concept of ancient or medieval world. Rather developed in 15th century after discovery of New World. And therefore they are fundamentally different, but imperialism can or cannot lead to colonialism. An example for this would be, for example, China is an example of imperialism, Western imperialism. Colonialism, you have India, Australia, Africa, Indochina as an example of colonialism. If we understand this, I'll talk to you about three types of colonialism. America, sure. And then I'll read it out of the PPT so as to consolidate, and we can go to Africa then. Are we clear with regards to basic concept? Imperialism, colonialism. What is Indochina? I will discuss with you, which is Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. That is what we have to discuss by the end of the class. Were the princely states under imperialism? That is called paramountcy. Don't mix suzerainty and paramountcy with imperialism. New World, where we started the whole discussion. Don't write New World question mark. Then the whole story of the past 9 classes is in vain. So New World is America, old world is Europe. Don't do this. Don't have this type of memory that we start a course and by the end of course I say India got independence. India? Acha? We were talking about India. Don't do that. That the course started with the New World and you're asking me New World question mark. This should not be your memory span. And if it is, you need revision. Mehru, I'll tell you, there is everything in the PPT. How imperialism works. Priyanshu, imperialism is that I reach your port with my military ships. I tell you that you sell your tea for $1. If you won't, my military ships will destroy the port. And there's a threat of power. This is what China had to see. India also saw that, but in a different way, subtle way, which is subsidiary alliance, doctrine of lapse, and even the Golconda Farman, which is the Golden Farman, or the Farman which Surat Farman, or the Farrukhsiyar Farman. All are ways in which they are dominating trade without fully using power. So threat of power is more important than actually use of power. Once you become territorially integrated or territorially concerned about a country, then you are more now related to colonialism. Colonialism is physically having that colony. It's like, for example, you own an ATM is imperialism. That when you want, you can go and take out money out of it. But now you have a bank, that is colonialism. That you basically have a whole system through which you get money. But for that, you need investment. The difference is effort. Imperialism is easier to manage. Colonialism is very difficult to manage. Because in India, if you see, the British had to go through a whole process of seeing what will work in India. That needs investment. A lot of money of the English also went into building the railways, the infrastructure. They took it from us only, but they were putting it back in some way. But in imperialism, that is not the case. No, both are not. Imperialism is not an ideology. It is also practiced. It's also practiced. I try to understand this point. If you're asking me an example, India went through imperialism first. Domination by the British. Thereafter, you go for example, Blue Waters policy, one of you said, is an imperialistic tool. But having Goa as a place where you are able to control everything is having a colony. So imperialism is the first stage. Second stage is colonialism. It is not that difficult. See, very simply, what is imperialism, colonialism? The practice of establishing its rule and dominance over economic and political life of the people outside its pale is called imperialism. But this rule is indirect rule. The objective is either exploitation when it comes to imperialism, and it is expansion into that country when it is colonialism. Lenin argued that when capitalism reaches its highest stage, it culminates into imperialism. Because the point is, capitalism needs markets and it needs raw material. And when it is about market and raw material, you can't have a very closely knit market and raw material if it is not coming from an area which you dominate. No, again, Anushika, totally wrong. East India Company had imperialism and at first and colonialism. No, don't divide into East India Company and Crown Rule, because East India Company started as a commercial, as an imperialistic power and became a colonial power when it got Bengal. These are one fundamental things which should be clear in modern India. You're asking me modern India questions here, but I presume that you have an understanding of how it works. Please try to understand it's a two-step process. Somebody can go through the first step, somebody can go through the first and second step both. But to do that, you need to be committed. That is the basic point. Imperialism, industrial countries subjugate and dominate underdeveloped countries of the world, which is that they are managing. And I'll give you a very simple example. There are two bodies in in the world right now, which are called neo-imperialistic tools. Can anybody tell me neo-imperialistic tools of the US? Two bodies, sometimes called the twins. Yes, the World Bank and the IMF. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund both are basically American tools of imperialism. That if I want to dominate a country, I will very simply, as America, ask World Bank and IMF not to give anything to that country, and then it will automatically come on its knees and it will come to the US, and then that is called domination. Or it will be ready to accept certain terms which may not be favorable. So understand this point. Imperialism exists till today, but it's called neo-imperialism, new type of imperialism. When East India Company failed to control colonialism, Parliament took it. Sure, you are complicating your understanding, but sure, that would be the right way of saying it. It's not about controlling, it's about the scale. The East India Company was capable, but the British Parliament became more interested in India. The point is, indirect rule, and the country which dominates is mother country, which is subjugated is colony. This may give you much bigger clarity. Globalization is a form of neo-colonialism. Again, word is neo-imperialism. Neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism, we use interchangeably. It would not be globalization. Globalization is a neo-imperialistic tool. MNCs are neo-colonialistic, which is that very simply certain big corporations such as Apple, such as Amazon, they dominate. That is a separate issue altogether. When MNCs start to control your world politics or start to control your national politics, how Twitter said that we will not agree to these things, that is neo-colonialism. Neo-imperialism will be globalization, cultural, what we call as, or WTO. WTO is also a very important neo-imperialistic tool. Why would you want some other country to tell you what to do? I control my trade, but the WTO tells me what to do with my trade. Why should America or any other country tell me how much subsidy should I give to my farmers? You tell me. Does it actually make sense? That amber box, this box, that box. You tell me that isn't WTO dictating something which should be domestic politics? That very simply, we should be able to give our farmers as much subsidy as possible. But they are saying no, that distorts the market. Amber box, green box, this the box, that box. China has developed a new type of concept, which is debt imperialism, which is give them so much money that they will never be able to repay. Which is that give the Africans, give the Pakistanis money which they've never seen. $86 billion was given by China to the Pakistanis. Today, if every Pakistani stands and gives certain money, $86 billion will also not come out. So they've never seen that much money. But you give them that. That's the basic point. But what you are trying to do here is you are coming out of the context. Again, now PETA and all you are trying to add to neo-colonialism, then you are distorting this understanding. See, I don't understand. As a UPSC aspirant, you need to simplify. Why do you add things which actually don't exist? You are complicating it. So, US drag India to WTO. Okay, World Bank, neo-imperialistic when India helps and impose global. No, World Bank is imperialistic because it controls credit for a nation. And credit in world economy is controlled by the way trade flows. WTO, IMF, and the World Bank together work in that sense. Okay. Now let's talk about this. When land is included, no, that's not true. That is technically not true. That's technically not true. Apple owns a whole Foxconn, or the Foxconn sector. The factory is owned by Apple. But would you say that it is colonialism? No. It's about when you start to play with that country, which is its politics. You start to change the structure, Governor General, this, that, Indian Council Acts, this, that. Thereafter, you start to play with the society, which is this concept of middle class intelligentsia, the martial races concept. You start to play with the economy, land revenue policy. Colonialism is not a joke. It's a proper committed concept. Okay. Now, imperialism, political and monetary dominance, either formally, informally. The problem is that your modern India is a little bit, either you're out of touch. If you apply these two, you will very simply see a major demarcation in how actually India went through both phases very evidently. Very evidently, it went through it. So try to use this, go back to your modern India and try to check it out. This is the larger theme of modern India, which is understanding colonialism. So if you've not done it, you will do it with me later. But that is the way I operate, which is to understand it in the larger ebbs and flows. If you go into event by event, then it will not make sense. That is what is actually happening here. Okay. When soft power plays with countries' hard power, again, Saurabh, you are trying to bring in international relations terms which you don't even understand. And then you are trying to bring it colonialism, imperialism. No. These are very serious terms. The very, very serious terms. That is the basic point. These are very serious terms. They're not jokes. So, political and monetary dominance, either formally or informally, exploitation for economic and what we call as control over its basic trade itself. Imperialism operates from the center. It is a state policy and is developed for ideological as well as fiscal reasons. Imperialism has its origin in the Roman period, longer history than colonialism. Taking total physical control over another. Total control. Imperialism is the ideology behind colonialism and is more focused on political control. So here it starts as imperialism, then becomes colonialism. Is nothing more than development of settlements for commercial intentions and thereafter expansion. And it goes back to 15th century, shorter history than imperialism. Now, what will give you more clarity here is there are three types of colonialism. Can I discuss the three types of colonialism? Can we discuss the three types of colonialisms? Is this making sense? We started here. This is where we started. 10 days back, this is where we started. Okay. Capturing other countries, sure. If you want to be, that is a simplistic, crude way of saying it. Okay. Right. One is called settler colonialism. The second is called exploitative colonialism. And the third is called neo-colonialism. Now, what do you mean by settler colonialism? Settler colonialism means the country or area which is colonized has no infrastructure or basic institutions developed by the colonizer. New Zealand, Australia, America, which is that you have a barren space. You have a barren space. You have nothing. You have the Americas, New Zealand, Australia. You have a colony. You have very simply a institution or institutionally nothing. You have indigenous population who have no mechanism of controlling anything, and therefore you develop everything. On the other hand, you have what is called the Indian type of colonialism, which is country is colonized proper structures, institutions, and economic institutions. Colonizer enters and changes as per needs. Example, India or Indochina or Indonesia. This is the easiest. When the British landed in India, did they have to make India's economy, or everything was created from scratch? That India's way of dealing with the world, India's internal, external trade, India's political institutions, were they all non-existent? Were they all non-existent? No. But sir, railways. But railways was a tool of exploitation. The addition of railways does not mean that, can I say that if the British were not here in 1613, there was nothing in India. India before 1757, what, sir? I think you've heard about the Mughals, at least heard about the Mughals, heard about Uttarpad, Dakshinpad, you've heard about Mauryas, you've heard about the Guptas, you've heard about the Pallavas, you've heard about the Cholas, you've heard about the Chauhans, you've heard about the Delhi Sultanate, you've heard about Mughal India. I hope you have. India, when British came to India, or when the British landed in India, India was not a barren land with nothing. Under the Mughal rule, be it as much chaotic as it may have been, by the time they land in India, under the medieval period, India became what we call as a Sone ki Chidi, or the golden bird. So the point of the matter is, empires are weak and decline, but India as a subcontinent was very, 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 very powerful and very prosperous. Now, this again, the problem is, whenever I'm giving India examples, you are getting more confused, which is the more problematic part here. So that should be the way I explain it to you, but you are getting confused over India itself. So there are two things. Either you have no idea of ancient and medieval, and you have totally no touch with modern India, or you really need to do these three things again with me. Because what is before 1757? Before 1757, there was no barren land was there. When Robert Clive said that I will take out from Bengal so much money, that what was he creating agriculture in India? So come on, this much you should know in that regard. So just making certain institutions does not make them settler colonialism. Can I now go to neo-colonialism? This is what happens when you have two very long break. It's called Gajini effect. I don't know. This is happening in 2 days. What will happen over months? That is the problem. India, अच्छा कुछ था India में पहले. अच्छा 1757. There was something before it also. Come on. Polity you've done economics, you've done multiple subjects. Somewhere or the other, they would have referred to something called the zamindars or the land reforms in India or decolonization. Come on. Okay. Can I move to neocolonialism if these two are clear? Okay. Now, well, Samim, I embody that basic idea also. Now, last is neocolonialism, which is the domination of countries without physical, political, or social control by modern MNCs and US based institutions. Let's remove US because it could be true for or foreign country based institutions. Simple, straightforward example, you've heard about it, called McDonald's diplomacy. How Google today controls the whole world, ABC Corp. Then how Amazon controls everything, how Apple controls everything, Walmart. So very simply, there are multiple companies today which control everything. Microsoft, sure. The simple straightforward point is that the world as of right now is under what we call as neocolonialism. The US were the first to do it, which is use democracy for colonization. And now the Chinese have developed a better model, which is debt imperialism or debt colonialism. The British do it, the Americans do it under the name of democracy, that we are going to give democracy to the Middle East, human rights, democracy, this and that. And thereafter, they start to dominate that country itself. So yes, Amazon, AWS, Amazon services today dominate everything, from storage to how we interact with everything. Dell, HP, Lenovo are not superpowers. Microsoft is very important because Dell, HP, Lenovo cannot work without Windows. It's not, the point is very simply, when we talk about types of colonialism, we have three types: settler, discovery, settlement, development of a colony, completely performed by the colonizer. Owners of development completely lies with the colonizer. Though these colonies have an indigenous population, they have almost no say in exploitation of land resources or any resources. Australia, New Zealand, North America. They have exploited colonialism. The colonial power stations its army, controls the local governments directly, indirectly. Systematic exploitation of to take whatever is possible, drain of wealth. India, Indonesia. Economic domination by Western powers, former colonial powers, without political conquest, achieved through unfair terms of trade, global corporations, and control over financial markets. Now, to go to Africa, we understand a very simple, straightforward concept, which is, what are the reasons? What are the reasons? Why do we have imperialism or colonialism? And you already know it again, but now I doubt that also. But the point is, first and foremost point is that it was all about the trade. It was all about trade, glory, resources, and the conversion interest, which we already saw in the beginning itself. And a very good manifestation of this is mercantilism, which is European powers, in order to accumulate gold and silver, they went to the Asian African countries and started to persuade, coerce, force these countries to accept unfair trade practices. That is what Adam Smith also did not like, and that is the concept of laissez-faire politics. Remove monopolies. But as soon as Industrial Revolution came, the need for colonies became more important. So capitalism and industrial revolution needs raw material and markets, and therein the industrial revolution fuels the needs for colony, the need for colonies. And last but not the least is how they all mask it. Everything is justified using this concept. White man's burden, which is that because we are racially superior, we are more modern, we need to make you modern. They used to call us barbaric, what we call as savages, non-civilized, but they're the same people who killed 11 crore people over nothing. So the point is that the hidden interest is economic, but the justification is moral and social. So very simply, before we go to Africa, I'm bringing in everything what we've done till this point together. Imperialism is the first stage, indirect, and only to get concessions or whatever you want from that country. No tension of managing that country and no taking control of the polity fully. Then comes colonialism. Colonialism can be three types itself: settler, exploitative, or neo, which is new. And all of this is based on direct control. Settler is when you create everything and then dominate. Exploitative is when you already have institutions, you then enter and change the polity, economy, society. And neo is the new way in which we are trying to do it without acting like a without acting like a mother country, through institutions such as IMF, the World Bank, the WTO. You can add the UN. You basically create a regime in which you cannot get any form of money or any form of credit or any form of trade if you are not subjugated to that country in that regard. Neo means new. Yeah, neo is a Latin word. Yes, neo. Okay. If all of this is clear, I want to go to Africa now. Are we all clear? I want everybody's questions and answers cleared right now here only. Why was China only imperialized? Because China was a very big tension. The society was very different. Britain already had India, France already had the Indochina, Dutch already had Indonesia. China was was very different culture, very vast country, and over and above that, what they wanted, they already got it. So they wanted Chinese tea, that nothing more. So China's domination or China not getting colonized is basically because of the way everybody was placed. If Britain did not have India, maybe they would have thought about China. But India gave Britain so much that China would have never given that also. SME response, atheist, you are my question. What is happening, Ruhan? I don't know what. To what question is the SME replying atheist? I don't know. Can we start Africa? Okay. I think your question was which is better book, Spectrum or Bipin Chandra? This is the question, right? I saw it somewhere. Again, asking modern India here. It's about comfort. Bipin Chandra is foundational. Spectrum you won't understand if you don't know modern India previously. Both are good books. Go to Spectrum if it suits you. But if you don't understand Spectrum from the get-go, have to go to Bipin Chandra. That is my basic concept. Okay. Human rights also, sir. What do you mean by human rights? Where did I say human rights? Then what is the issue of human rights? Do I need to teach you social issues, human rights? Substantiate on the question at least. Human rights. अच्छा लग रहा है सुनने में. Tell me what should I say? Tell me what is the aspect here. What is human rights? Better question. Human rights question mark. Okay. Whilst the person is figuring out what about human rights, let's talk about Africa. Okay. Now, when we talk about Africa, UPSC used to love this area quite a lot. So between 2013, 15, maximum till 16, 17, they used to ask questions. And thereafter, they have stopped asking questions because the area is saturated. But because you should know this is the only continent we've not talked about properly. So let's talk about Africa. Human rights as a concept of neo-imperialism. You kill everybody in your own country, but you use human rights as a form of coercion for states to accept your political domination. If that makes sense to you, you will understand what it is. Okay. Africa. Africa is the cradle of civilization. We already know that. The earliest humans started to migrate out of the African sector itself. It's a huge continent. And there are multiple things about Africa which made it very important in human history generally, which is that it is resource rich. It has a lot of tribes at this point of time. And when I talk about, for example, 1800, 1750 period, only 10% of Africa was actually explored or known to the Europeans. And we can say only that much was colonized also. So when we talk about the Africans, this is the state of affairs when we talk about 1800, 1800 and 1850 maximum. It's a huge continent, very big continent with multiple tribes. Some of them are Islamic, some of them have own religion, very unique culture, resource rich. Amazon forest is not in Africa. Mixing it up with Brazil. But the way this continent worked out was that we already know that the northern sector was under the Ottomans. We already know that the northern sector was under Ottomans, but very dry sector. As it is, we know that this whole sector we have the Sahara Desert. So the location in Africa really matters. But the Europeans initially did not really go too much into Africa. They used to be very scared of Africa as a continent, very wildlife rich and very, very dense forest in certain parts. So they used to just bounce around on the coast, and used to hug the coast as much as possible. But the biggest point which I want to argue here is that Africa was big enough for everyone. big enough for everyone. And this is what is reflected in its way of colonization also. See, by 1600 they had figured out that they can use inter-tribal warfare and conflict to get slaves, which were very, very important for the Americas. For the Americas, the black slaves were very important. But what happens is that once the people start to realize the economic, what we call as economic value of the African continent, now there is what is called inter, as we know, cradle of civilization, numerous tribes which are there. One of the most prominent ones, such as Mali, Lunda, Luba, Merina, you have Zulu, and you have Asantis, very, very big ones. And between 1600 to 1800, the economic value of Africa is becoming more and more evident. So, Africa is seen as a more and more important colony or colonial space for market and resources. Now, what happens is that this leads to what we call as inter-imperialistic or colonialistic rivalry, that Britain starts to fight with France, starts to fight with Belgium, starts to fight with Germany for certain sectors, starts to fight with the Spanish, starts to fight with the Portuguese. These are some of the countries which controlled Africa, but this is called inter-imperialistic rivalry. So what the different countries of Europe started to do was to fight amongst themselves to control Africa. But they realized one thing, and that realization came to Bismarck in 1884 in what is called as the Berlin Conference, that we do not need to scramble for Africa, that we do not need to scramble for Africa. Let's do one thing. Let's divide Africa amongst ourselves. Let's divide Africa and everyone gets something. Basically, there's a scramble means to move around very quickly. Scramble. There's a saying in Hindi, chor chor mosere bhai, that all thieves are related to each other. And this is basically Berlin Conference for you. That Bismarck says one thing, that why do we need to fight? Why do we need to fight? Let's do one thing. Let's divide the whole sector amongst ourselves. So everybody gets something. France gets Ivory Coast, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Mali, Central African Republic, Chad, and Senegal. Thereafter, the British said, we'll take South Africa, Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, Egypt, later, which will be taken fully, Ghana, Sierra Leone. So the Portuguese said, hum bhi kuch de do. So Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde, then Sao Tome. Germans said that it is our idea, we should also get something. So Namibia, German Congo, and Guyana-Bissau. Spanish said, okay, we are not too involved in this power, but at least give us something. Okay, Morocco, Protectorate, which French will take later, which will again become French colony. And Belgium controlled Congo and Rwanda, Burundi, and this country was 1/100th of the country which it actually dominated. Belgium 100 Belgians would sit or fit inside Congo. This is, you don't have to learn this, but this is called the scramble for Africa, which is that rather than fighting each other, let's sit in Berlin and let's divide Africa amongst ourselves. And that is why you will realize that if you've ever seen a globe or a map or an atlas, the lines, the border lines of Africa are very straight. The lines of the border lines are very straight. Why? Because they said, okay, give me a scale, I'll keep it on the map of Africa, and then I'll draw lines. Very neat lines they were making. Very neat lines they were making. The point is, nobody wanted to fight. Basically, white man did not want to fight a white man for something which could be divided and was so big. Who got profitable deals? See, point is, French West Africa is written. But the point is, French West Africa is more or less a desert. So it's not about amount of territory, it's about what you get generally. But obviously the British got what they wanted, and the most best of the colonies were British only. My point is not that who gets a bad or a worse deal. It's about how Africa gets affected and how African lives meant nothing. They are not even sitting in Africa. They are sitting in Berlin, in Germany, and now dividing Africa. What I'm trying to establish here, and something which I've tried or have been trying to do it for the past 9 classes, is that these are our world leaders. These big people who talk about no violence, who talk about peace, who talk about soft power, who talk about human rights, who talk about that how can a citizen be killed in my country, who talk about you are doing something anti something. They have this big fundas in front of them. They are nothing but hypocrites, and literally the world today, what it is today. And I'll tell you, every problem in Africa is because of these Europeans. I'll give a very simple example, a point I will reiterate. There's a body called FAO. Do you know what is FAO? FAO, what is the full form of FAO? It's a UN body. Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. Very good. It's attached to the UN. Now, most of the task of the FAO is to provide food and promote agriculture in Africa. Most of its projects are in Africa. Now, tell me one thing. Who destroyed the agriculture in Africa? The Europeans. And today, when they give back to the Africans, they do it as a favor. Ehsan jatate. That, okay, we have FAO, we have funded 14 million, 20 million, 30 million. We are sending money to the Africans. You are the reasons why they are like that only. Systematic destruction of sustainable agriculture, subsistence agriculture, small farmers, poverty, hunger, malnutrition, everything is because of the Europeans only. And today when they do it, they basically do it as they're doing a favor. A very simple analogy would be that the Europeans basically beat up the Africans left, right, and center. Every bone was broken, and now the Europeans say, okay, we are ready to pay the hospital bill for you. But why did you break the body then? This is the problem, that these powers still dominate, but sometimes we forget who they really are. So very simply, the colonization of Africa was done very neatly. It was done very neatly. And The neatness comes from the fact that from a continent like this, they became a continent which was very neatly divided amongst the Europeans, because they didn't want to fight amongst themselves. And we know that the reasons for colonizing Africa are very simple, straightforward, be it any country. First and foremost reason was slave trade. They needed a perennial supply of slaves. However, slave trade will become irrelevant after 1833 when everybody is going to start to industrialize. They also took the diamonds, the gold, the silver, all resources taken out of Africa. Today, most of African culture does not exist in Africa also. It is sitting in that chor bazaar called the British Museum, which is everything which they took from African, very important specimens. Their heritage and culture is sitting in London right now. And once the slave trade collapsed, now the purpose of Africans were become a market. Give us raw material, guaranteed market, profitable investment. And this comes with the Europeans for sure. The Europeans talk about certain religions. The Europeans today talk about certain religions being aggressive, certain religions being problematic. The number of people which Christianity has killed, has anybody ever accounted for that? Including the ancient and medieval history, from Inquisition to the colonization of America to the colonization of Africa, has anybody actually accounted for how many people the Christian missionaries got killed? It would be in crores. But no one cares. Because why? Because they control the narrative. So let's talk about the effects. Can we talk about that? Are you understanding how Africa got colonized? This used to be a standard question. Scramble for Africa. I'll show you a question. Now it doesn't come and is not relevant also. Scramble for Africa, which is European powers fighting amongst themselves and then dividing them very neatly at you. Just have to write Berlin Conference 1884. Now, is everybody following me today? A very silent you are. That's not a good thing, or both good and bad thing. What is it? It's a good silence or a bad silence? Vaibhav, you email me, I'll get you connected, don't worry. Okay. Now. Okay. Now let's talk about the effects. Good silence, very good. Now when we talk about the effects, politically, all ethnic violence which existed or exists today is because of the Europeans. Because what they did was called, they introduced what are called artificial boundaries. Artificial boundaries. But you tell me one thing, sitting in Berlin, were they able to make out which tribe is where? They divided it amongst themselves as per their convenience. Now, most of the ethnic violence which happens today between tribes till today, Rwanda, Burundi, Niger, Sudan issue, that all comes out of this only. Ashita, you just watch the video again. Thereafter, economically and socially, the impact is even more problematic. Artificial borders remain a problem in Africa till today. Ethiopia, Eritrea, Rwanda, Burundi, Belgium, and German Congo, everywhere there is still violence. All because they just sat at a place and did it. But when we talk about economic, it is even more evident. Why? Because what initially they did was they took out slaves. Once the need of slaves was gone, they started plantations. And the biggest thing which the British did in India also, and that is why in India, what is the most evident impact of the British in India? Evident thing that yes, India did get properly colonized and our economy was dent. Is there any very important indicator for that? It's not drain of wealth, it's not deindustrialization, it's something else. Not commercialization of agriculture. It's a cumulative impact of everything. Divide and rule, deindustrialization, no. Yes, Kampal, very good. Famines. The propensity, the number, and the scale of famines which used to happen in India were because of the British. Never in India, nobody used to die of hunger. That is for sure. And the British very categorically destroyed Indian agriculture, the weaving sector, the commercialization of agriculture had the same impact here also, which is that because these plantations were based on cash crops and commercial crops, which these Europeans wanted, they moved away from food crops. And that is why hunger, poverty, malnutrition all exist in Africa today. Because their agriculture was fully destroyed. They changed their economy as per the needs of the Europeans. So the economic output of the colonies was linked to not their own, but the needs of the economic powers or the colonial powers. And a huge army of landless agricultural labor and plantation labor was created to suit the needs of the colonial power for cheap labor in the market. The Portuguese were the ones who pioneered the gold, ivory, and slave trade initially from the western coast itself. The Senegal sector, which Senegal, no, Senegal is a French colony though, but that area was the one which was discovered by the Portuguese first. Thereafter, the next decade or so, this is going to be the major concept of economic exploitation from Africa. But later, the way the commodities were being asked for, the commodities were being in or were in demand in Europe, that dictated how the Portuguese then introduced certain crops. For example, Africa, the Portuguese first, in India also they did it. Maize, sugarcane, in Sao Tome, sugar, and later tobacco, cotton, palm oil, groundnut, coffee, rubber, all were introduced. And they were not introduced for the betterment of the Africans. It was introduced to systematically exploit the Africans. So if you look at it economically, today we have parts of Africa. Sao Tome is a place. Sao Tome is a Portuguese colony. Economically, today, whatever we see, now do you get it that the Africans were not born like this? The Africans were not born like this. They were also very prosperous. They were also very culturally rich. They were also very economically rich. Africans had multiple technologies which used to be very innovative when it came to the harsh climate and environment of Africa itself. But everything was abandoned, and very simply, the needs of the colonial powers dictated it. Now, the worst impact which came to the Africans was social, which is that their languages, their religions, their culture was changed. Africans either speak English, French, or Portuguese. Very rarely Spanish. because their own indigenous languages were destroyed. One thing which we don't realize today is that when the Africans came into contact with the Europeans, Africans didn't even have basic immunity for diarrhea, for common cold, for malaria, for dengue, very standard diseases which existed in Europe. Lakhs of Africans just died of cholera, diarrhea, common cold. And their cattle also died because their cattle also, the animals in Africa, were also not acclimatized to the germs which the Europeans were bringing on their ships from Europe. The Africans literally lost lakhs of people randomly. Cattle, men, everything. One European sneezed and that whole village is gone because they didn't have immunity for that basic disease itself. If you don't understand the pain of colonialism, which as Indians we should and we have and we've gone through it, but because we take our freedom for granted today, and it's very easy to protest and get what you want, do not forget that this is the cost of colonialism. We also paid for it. But if one continent has persisted because of multiple, close to 50 nations being there, and because their decolonization was also very late, it is Africa. So, plague used to affect Europe and India both. Plague, Spanish flu, everywhere. Traditional religions were replaced by Christianity. Almost everything south of Nigeria was Christianized. What was the reason why they stopped slave trade? Because there was no need for slaves in industries. Now, can anybody tell me a physical example of how the Christianization of Nigeria, the whole of Africa, has created an issue today in Africa? There's an example for this. An organization looking for a name. Come on. Not ISIS, not AU. Very good, Vaishna. Not Taliban does not operate in Africa. Boko Haram, very good, Arpita. Boko Haram. Boko Haram is a Nigeria-based Islamic organization which abducts kids and both women and, or rather, girls and boys. And they believe that the Western Nigerian culture, which was pushed by the British in the form of Christianity, is not true culture of Nigeria. It is basically a terrorist organization. And it recruits only kids because it wants to develop a new civilization. But it is surely it is a terrorist organization. But then who created this terrorist organization? Who created it? It is a terrorist organization. Nobody is denying it. Then who created it? It is the Europeans. It is the British. Now it has become a problem. But why was there a need to do this? Native African languages, dialects declined, were replaced by English, French, Portuguese, except in North Africa where Arabic persisted along with English and French. New diseases such as smallpox, measles, malaria, dysentery wiped out thousands of Africans. These diseases were introduced by the European settlers. Ethnic divisions were exaggerated by the European divide and rule policy. For example, the Tutsis and the Bahutus in Rwanda, Burundi till today are fighting. And Europeans brought in modern system of education, which did allow them to decolonize later, which I'm going to discuss in the next 10-15 minutes. But that was their justification to what they were doing in Africa. But the biggest issue which still remains for an African today, Sakshi, we still were able to protect our languages quite a lot, but the Africans weren't able to. The biggest issue which an African faces today is racism. And it's all across the world. America has its own problem of the African American population. But in Asia also, we are not very sensitive to their experience. And let's be very, very, very honest. When it comes to African population in India, we also don't have. It's not that we have a very bad track record, but we also have issues wherein certain names are called, certain cultural divide is there. Sometimes there's violence also. But if you are a black man or a black woman today in the world, one thing is for sure, which is that you will face some form of racism for sure, be it in the education system, be it in the social system, be it in the political system, be it in standard grassroots level behavior. And this is again something which persists as a reminiscence or as a form of something which is there in the world today and has been given by the Europeans. As it is, it's called the white man's burden. We are the brown man, the blacks, the brown, anybody who was not white was very, very straightforward, considered this problematic aspect of the world, and the Europeans still create impediments or have institutions which do it. And you can see it all around you. The colonial legacy in India is if you would actually see it, is our obsession with fairness of skin. We have multiple creams, multiple things in India which make you fair as much as possible. We are obsessed as a civilization with fairness of skin, and that is not because something we always used to think of. It's a proper European thing. It's a proper European thing. We are still stuck in the colonial mentality. You could be from very good universities, University of Madras, Calcutta, from Jamia Millia Islamia, or JNU from Delhi University. You could be from Mumbai University. Very good universities are there in India. But if a person comes from some random University of Middlesex, Unisex, Rose, White Rose, Black Rose, this Rose, that Rose, multiple counties are there in Britain, he would be given more preference when it comes to educational qualifications. He may be a third divisioner there, but a third divisioner from America and UK is better than a topper from, for example, any Indian Standard University, Osmania, any university. So this is where we still are stuck, unfortunately. But for the Africans, it is even more pronounced. Can I move to decolonization? Then I give you a break. Decolonization is a very straightforward thing. You don't have to learn anything except for two boxes. Okay. Now, when we talk about decolonization, there are two models which Africa followed. One is armed struggle and rebellion. And basically, this model comes from Vietnam, which I will teach you. And the other one is where India led the way, which is national movements. And this was basically picked up from India. Here, what is the way we end racism? Sensitization. Here, the INC was the model, and Western educated Africans took up the leadership. The same way we have the middle class intelligentsia in India, they base their basic model on what we call as the Indian model. Now, for the purpose of the examination, because you never know with UPSC, you just need to know two things, which is certain examples of armed struggle which happened in Africa, and certain insurgency is a very different word. Insurgency is not used in these contexts. Now, the other concept is two boxes. One is the examples for armed struggle, and the other is the leaders which were important. But what was the reason for decolonization? Two straightforward reasons are there, and wherein basically our course, the module number 9 and colonization decolonization intersect. It is World War II and Cold War politics. The Second World War very simply destroyed the power of the Europeans. European power destroyed, and that allowed for decolonization. And Cold War politics, America wanted the Europeans to lose their colonies so that it could emerge as a unipolar superpower. So understand this point. When America said to all the world that please leave up your colonies, it was not doing it for us. It was doing it for itself, which is that I can't have colonies now because the world is different. So nobody is going to have a colony. This was Cold War politics. So when we talk about decolonization in Africa, we have one which is the armed struggle model, which I will show you. There were multiple rebellions which will happen all across Africa, and the second one was national movement. But the reason why this became possible was because the world became very weak after the Second World War. And the world which used to control Africa was now so weak that they could not hold on to it. Still, most of the African nations got independence as late as in 1960s and 70s because they were not ready to give up their colonies. It was a conscious policy of the Americans to decolonize Africa because that would weaken the European resolve. So we know that very simply it is the Second World War, which is an important cause which weakened the military economic power of England, France, and Holland and Germany, which actually led to this concept itself. And the post-war England withdrew from India, Sri Lanka, Burma, France, from Indochina, but their struggle was different. Now, armed struggle was the first way in which they actually fought, in which you have guerrilla warfare, you have proper direct and indirect wars in which the Africans are fighting the Europeans. This model comes from Vietnam, basically, which I will teach you in the after the break itself. And the Vietnam Communist Party carried out protracted guerrilla warfare against the French. Now, this is what you have to remember. This is what throughout this whole course, I have not asked you to remember anything. This is the only thing I ask you to remember, which is the names of certain rebellions and where they happened. For example, you have Ashanti tribe fought in Ghana against the British. One. Then Zimbabwe, again British, Chimurenga. Then Menalamba, France in Madagascar. Thereafter, Maji Maji in Germans for what is called Tanzania today, which was Tanganyika. And the Zulus who fought in South Africa against the Dutch. So what you have to remember is the location and the rule or the ruler or the colonial power against which they fought. If you can remember these 5 points, the work is done. The work is done. And the same is, there are two boxes. If you remember them, very easy names that ways, which is they can't ask you a question in prelims. Mains question they can ask you, give examples, or when you're writing a question on the rebellions, it would be good to sprinkle some names. Ashanti, Chimurega, Mena Lamba, Maji Maji, Zulu. Not a very big thing. And thereafter, you have Ghana, Zimbabwe, Madagascar, Tanzania, and South Africa. This is no, Ashanti word has nothing to do with Gandhiji. Ashanti was a tribe even before Gandhiji was born. The point is, it's called Ashante. It's not Ashanti, it's Ashante. But the point is that, can you remember these 5 points here? Have not asked you to remember anything, just asking you to do this. 5 points. Okay. Now, the second way to get independence when it came to decolonization of Africa was mass action, which is by means of mass movement. For example, the African National Congress, which was based on the Indian National Congress. And this was mostly led by Western educated charismatic leaders. And now comes the second, the next most important box, which again you would have to sprinkle the names, but I don't expect the UPSC to give you a question here, which is the leaders and the country which they actually decolonized. For example, Jomo Kenyatta, from which the name Kenya comes out. Thereafter, Kwame Nkrumah. This is Ghana. Thereafter, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria. And Cabral for Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau. 4 names here, 5 names there. 9 total. And if you can remember these 9, the discussion is more or less done. Because then I would just want to give you a timeline. That's it. 9 things you can remember. Just write them down. Before the examination, have to revise once. Country also, obviously. If you give an example, you have to give the country name. Na? Okay. Okay. Can we then just look at the timeline? I want to give you a basic idea. Do not remember this. I want to now close it and then we can take a break. Okay, Weber. Okay. So 1957, 1960, 63. Ghana got independence in 57, 10 years after us. Ivory Coast and Senegal are 2 countries. First, British African colony to gain independence under Nkrumah. Nigeria in 1960, not a very protracted or very big war for independence. But what the British do, and that they are very good at doing, they gave the power to the minorities so that Nigeria would get destabilized. In Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta played a very important role, but we have both models in Kenya where the Mau Mau and the Kikuyu tribe rebelled against the British also, but the British very categorically crushed the rebellion. So in Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta had to play a very important role. Thereafter, South Africa is the most interesting case. See, South Africa initially was a Dutch colony. And they used to call themselves Boers. Boers. And that is why the Dutch and the British fought with each other initially, because South Africa is a very good colony that way. The Boer Wars, yes, in which even Gandhi got the Kaisar-e-Hind title itself. Now, the Dutch developed this colony quite well. And the British understood the importance of this colony also, because it's a very cool environment, very resource-rich country. all trade to Asia has to go through the Cape of Good Hope. So this colony was very important, and the population of whites in South Africa was quite big. And that is why when it came to the decolonization of South Africa in 1910 itself, the English gave up Africa. But what they did was that they gave it up to the South African whites, or the white population in South Africa. And they thereafter followed a very inhumane concept for which Indian leaders were also protesting against, which is called apartheid. Apartheid was the concept of racial segregation of spaces. Racial segregation of spaces, wherein the white and black were separated. Buses, white and black space. Beaches, white and black beach. Food joints, restaurants, white and black. Everything was separated according to color. And in South Africa, multiple leaders based on the Indian model of independence, the African National Congress under Nelson Mandela, Steve Biko, and Desmond Tutu, they fought against apartheid, and the African National Congress existed. These are the important leaders of it, and that being Nelson Mandela itself. Mandela went to jail for breaking the apartheid law symbolically, and he will remain in jail till apartheid will not be removed. And his stay in jail was a symbolic example of how South Africa was suffering. Led by India between 1960s and 70s, we created the social boycott of South Africa, that till South Africa has apartheid, we will not trade with you, we will not have any interaction. And that is why in the early 1990s, after multiple countries joined India, the President F.W. de Klerk lifted apartheid and Mandela was freed. And in 1994, imagine, 1994, not even more than 30 years, South Africa became the proper non-racially segregated country it is today, with Nelson Mandela as the president. And this is basically Africa for you. We'll do the previous questions in the end. I want to go to Indochina after the break. Can we take a break now? Can we take a break? Anybody has any issue in Africa? You understand there is no issue generally. Don't have to learn apartheid. There's no question coming from that. Don't have to learn their years. Just have to understand the basic concept. So can we take a break and then talk about Indochina? Because this is our insurance policy. I'll tell you why once I come back. Okay, perfect. So we'll be back at 6:55. And when we're back at 6:55, we will go. No, why African countries are facing military coup? Because the way power was transferred to most of these African countries, it was done to either weak leaders or to tribes which were minorities, and therefore political stability never came through. Therefore, militaries play a very important role. Don't have to remember anything, Rashmi, from the last slide. No. Okay. So, give you 1 minute back. Okay. See you. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Can we start again? Yes, sir. Okay. Now, when we talk about our course in a way, see, with Africa, more or less the course is over. But one random year, UPSC asked a question on the Dutch experience of colonialism, or the Indonesia question, that discussed the process of decolonization in Indonesia for some reason. Now, obviously, they will not, the Malayan Peninsula and the whole sector related to that whole, that is basically Dutch Indies, Britain mixed, that Malayan Peninsula question. So, in a way, now they're not repeating that sector. But we need to be one step ahead in a way. And the discussion with regards to Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, which is Indochina, this whole sector, is an insurance policy. No one else is doing it. Nobody wants to do it, but I want to do it for two basic reasons. One, you get to know the story of Vietnam War, so it adds up to the Cold War politics. And second, wherein if by mistake the British go, not the British, but the UPSC, if they go into this area, you are prepared with regards to any form of question. So when we talk about Indochina, this is very simply your insurance policy. I hope you don't need it, but this is a banker lap or something called surplus which we can keep, because see, Africa has already been asked, America has already been asked, France is already done, Europe centric we are already doing. I don't think the Indian government is going to ask you a question on Chinese independence. So very simply, with Indo China being the only area where they've not touched anything, this is the best way to go ahead. So I am trying to give you the logic of doing this topic, which is very simply insurance policy. It's a long story, but you have to remember basic things out of it. And I hope you will not even need to use it in the long run. Are we clear with regards to the logic of what we are doing here? Why are we doing it? What is the logic? Yes? Okay. Now, let's talk about Indochina. The reason we call it Indochina is because there is Indian and Chinese cultural influences, and it were the mighty imperial Cholas who actually were able to dominate this sector, and that is why there was a spread of ideas and the concept and even Indian religion and culture into this sector. So from the north, it gets its idea, the influence from China. But because India dominated this sector for close to 100, years under the Cholas, it also has that idea. But today, you can identify three countries here, which is Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. But when we are looking towards our, or turning our attention towards this area, it was basically not three, but 5 units. Laos and Cambodia are much bigger than what they are today. But Vietnam used to be Tonkin, Annam, and Cochin, China. 3 units. Now, in a way, we are also changing the taste of colonialism, because we are now going to discuss French colonialism, because this is basically the colony of the French. It's a colony of the French. So when we talk about Cambodia, Laos, Tonkin, Annam, and Cochin China, it was the French who landed there in the late, what we call as early 18th century, early 19th century, if you want to say. And the reason is very simple. The French had no other option, because India, an Indian subcontinent, was already taken by the British. The Dutch controlled the Indonesian sector, Straits of Malacca, the Malayan Peninsula, and even parts of the Polynesian sector were under the British in that regard. So the French had nothing to really do with it. So what they did was that they, in their pursuit for looking for colonies, landed in a small city called here Toraine. And it is from here that the process of colonization will start, which will also be quite long. But the question would be, who ruled this sector before the French did? But as I said, it will start in 1862. Until 1907, they will keep on expanding this sector. But now what I want you to do is remember what I'm telling you. Don't even need to go into the details right now. Just try to enjoy the story. It's a long one and it's a painful one. Not for you, but for the Vietnamese. So, before the French started to dominate this area, it was under what are called the Nguyen emperors. Nguyen is the dynasty. It's a local dynasty here. And the Nguyen emperors, in a way, were only in name the rulers. It was the local governors who managed power. And the problem here is that Nguyen emperors don't really have any control over Tonkin, Annam, or Cochin China, and they're acting independently. So now, as I said, the French will land here. They will realize that this sector is very fertile, but they were close to a very important city, which is called Saigon city, which is today called Ho Chi Minh city. Saigon was a very important port for rice, and till today is a very important port for food items and food exports. And now the French got interested in this sector because they were able to see fragmentation, which is that the governors have the real power, but they are too small to fight the French. And the Nguyen emperors really don't have any control over the governors. So the first sector which the French capture is first capturing Saigon city and thereafter taking Cochin China. Taking Cochin China was easier, or generally easy, because it was a little bit of the off the grid type of area, because it's not linked to the Chinese sector, and except for Saigon, the cities were very small. But by 1862, the process of colonization of Vietnam had started. Whilst Cochin China came to them via defeating the governor, what is more important is Tonkin and Annam. But in order to control Tonkin and Annam, you need to control this gulf, which is called the Gulf of Tonkin. Now the problem is that in the Gulf of Tonkin, for the French, this gulf is controlled by Chinese illegal traders, who we call as pirates, illegal traders. A lot of illegal activities, illegal drugs and commodities used to be smuggled into China from the Gulf of Tonkin via Tonkin itself. And the French have not a very good history of fighting people. And that is why their first attempt when it came to fighting for Gulf of Tonkin, they went with 2-3 boats, and the pirates literally destroyed everything which the French had at this point of time. And the French actually had to learn from their mistake, go back, and then come the second time with a bigger force and a bigger navy to dominate the Gulf of Tonkin. So again, the second way was to take Tonkin, and thereafter the French negotiated with the Nugan emperors that we will be protecting this area. This is a French protectorate, but basically they were colonizing it, and the Nugan emperors really had no control. So the way they colonized this sector was first to dominate, but use their naval power to control this area generally. Thereafter, they started to move inwards, and their expansion, as I said, was painfully slow, because when they started in 1862, then 1884, then it will come 1883, 84. So this area will come first, second, and third, and thereafter they will move inward 1888. By 1893, they had moved a little bit more inward. 1904, they will move towards the Laos sector. By 1907, they had basically captured most of what we today call as Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. So again, nobody's asking you this story because it's a very straightforward, simple story. I'll read it out to you also. So Naval Commander Rigaud de Guleli, or Gueli, whatever you want to call it, was ordered to attack a harbor city called the city of Torain. Then he moved towards the southern sector of it, which was Saigon city, seized Saigon in 1859. Thereafter, the Vietnamese were unable to give staunch resistance to the French power. Therefore, in 1862, they got a treaty, and the first 5 years they were consolidating Cochin China. Thereafter, to control the Red River Delta or the Gulf of Tonkin, the simple, straightforward point was the Chinese pirates were the problem. Now, the Indo-Chinese Union was established by the French by 1887. By 1893, Laos and Cambodia were added to the Union, and together, Cochin China, Tonkin, Annam, Laos, Cambodia became the French sector in that regard. So, very straightforward. It's a simple, straightforward story of territorial expansion. And I think nobody should have a problem here, which is first Cochin China, then Tonkin Annam, then Laos, Cambodia. No other detail needs to be known. You just need to know that it is a slow expansion of the French in this sector. Anybody have any issue here? Straightforward story, not extremely complicated that way. No issue? Not really. Okay. As it is, details don't matter to you. I will tell you the names which matter to you later. Now, what is the effect? Or why did the French invest? Why did the French invest in this area? And the reason is that, see, Cochin China, Annam, Tonkin, which is Vietnam together, tea, rice, coffee, pepper, coal, zinc, tin were very, very important resources. But Cambodia also gave them rice and pepper crops. At this point of time, it was believed that most of the French were actually consuming Indo-Chinese, what we call as rice. However, Laos was useless. Nepal, Bhutan, Tibet are also called, yes, Sakshi, today it is called Indochina. Previously, this was called Indochina. Now, these are countries. Now, Laos is mostly useless because it has no real crops to give and no real, what we call as metals to give also. But Laos had one thing, which is timber, which is wood. And it is believed that if you today go into the treaty of, if you go today to the Palace of Versailles or any French building which was made during the 19th century, all of that would have come from Laos. The deforestation of Laos at the scale of 60 to 70% of it was all because of the French. Imagine the level of environmental damage and destruction they would have done to basically make Laos economically viable. For once, imagine it, and for once, understand it, that what tangible impact colonialism has to us today. We talk about colonialism as an alien thing, but imagine the carbon sink called Laos. How much carbon would have been, in a way, released into the atmosphere because of the colonization of Laos? This is how you link your history with your environment, because environment also has a history. This is the sad part of the story, that somehow whatever these Europeans did, the destruction of this earth single-handedly goes to the European continent. But who is basically paying for it? We as Indians, Southeast Asia, Polynesia, and the least developed countries of Africa. And when we talk about common but differentiated responsibilities, the West is not ready to even accept that. They accept it in principle but not in practice. You would have heard something about the green climate fund, $100 billion per year for the developing countries to transition to green technology. Not even first tranche of that $100 billion has come from the West. Zero. And this is what it is. Global warming, climate change, we as India can't expand or accelerate our production with traditional technologies because that leads to more and more global warming. So we have to choose a much expensive path and a longer path. But that's the point. This is colonialism for you. That they very simply brought us to a point where we have a disadvantage, and they're making sure that we remain disadvantaged. And all of them, as much as they can not agree on most of the things, they can agree on one thing, that they will not pay for anything. They will not pay for anything. And that is the sad truth about this whole case. This is why UPSC wants you to know world history. In the last class, this is what I'm trying to say. This is what I'm trying to tell you since the first class. World history value is not what you learn in class. World history is about an eye-opening moment for you, wherein you understand that the leaders or the people who we talk about, who will look towards this P5, this G8, the G7, they all are hypocrites. They all are the reason why the world is what it is today. But they act like that holier than thou, that they are not the problem. So understand this point, that unfortunately, the Europeans still in a way control everything. And if you look around, you will realize that the West still controls everything. Who will get money, who will not get money. I can produce solar panels at a much cheaper cost, but I have to take it from America because the WTO tells me to do it. I don't know what is the logic of that. And what is the point of actually adhering to these things. But the problem is that if we start to very blatantly not or blatantly ignore the WTO as an exporting nation, we will then see retaliation from these countries. But I will give credit to Russia for sure for one thing, which is that Russia has showed to the world that how economic sanctions are useless. This is what the Russians used to. This is what the Europeans used to say, right? Economic sanctions. We will give you economic sanctions. The West applied economic sanctions on Russia, and their own economy is now going into recession because oil, gas, everything started to go up, and very simply, Europe is now on the verge of recession. Literal recession. There's a recessionary trend across the world right now, and that is the basic point you need to understand. And that is unfortunately the story. So, if we understand why Vietnam was colonized, as Indians we do, can I talk about decolonization and then we go into previous year questions, strategy, and module by module understanding? Yes? Okay. True, Monica, in a way. Divide and rule still works, unfortunately, in most cases. Now, when I talk about decolonization of Vietnam is a very long process. It will start with what we call as a person called Phan Dinh Phung, who will actually talk about decolonization, but he will not talk about decolonization from the French and then moving forward, but he will talk about going back to the Nguyen Emperor. So he was a restorative rebellion and movement. Can anybody also tell me a name of a restorative rebellion which happened or revolt which happened in India? Very good. The revolt of 1857. The revolt of 1857 was a restorative revolt, which is that it wanted to restore the old leaders back. And that is why it's called a restorative rebellion. Thereafter, the father of modern nationalism in Vietnam is a person called Chao. Phan Bai Chao. Phan Bai Chao was actually the one who took the movement forward. He talked about decolonization, but with modernization and new ideas. So he said that we need to remove the French, not the new ideas itself. But Chao's problem was that he was too Japan based and wanted to go to Japan, wanted to go to China, learn how clandestine means illegal governments work. He even declared that he was the ruler of Vietnam from China and from Shanghai. From Shanghai, these are people, these are not places. Phan Bai Chao is a person. Now, from Shanghai, which was that point of time a British protectorate, he will be picked up and his movement will be destroyed. I'm trying to give you an overview here. Thereafter, during the First World War, there was something called the Vietnam or Vietnamese National Party. But the problem of the Vietnamese National Party was their way of freedom was military mutiny. Basically, do multiple 1857s to get independence. And they will be able to organize Yen Bai mutiny in a place called Yen Bai. But the French, when it comes to crushing nationalism, are worse than the British. Because the French, the solution to their issue of nationalism was kill everyone. So Phan Ding Phung was killed. Phen Bai Chao and his supporters were killed. Phen Bai Chao basically was put into house arrest. Vietnamese National Party, each and every member was killed. And Yen Bai Mutiny, everybody was killed. So imagine that the answer to the British against Rowlatt Satyagraha was bring every INC member in front of the shooting squad and kill everyone. Not who is Yen Bai. Yen Bai is a place. And this is where the French and the British were different. French were once and for all end it. How they were mutinying their own leaders in the French Revolution, very simply kill everyone. But the architect of modern Vietnam, who actually gave them independence, is a person called Ho Chi Minh. And he is a communist because he will form the Communist Party of Vietnam, which is called Viet Minh. Viet Minh. And the Viet Minh will have a very Viet Minh. This will lead to between 1935 till 1975. They will have a series of wars and events which will lead to independence. Now, whatever name I have written here is more than enough to remember and very straightforward. I will tell you what to remember. But Phan Dinh Phung, Phen Bai Chao, Vietnamese National Party, Ho Chi Minh, Communist Party, and close to 40 years of war. This is their basic story. I've basically given you basic story. And in between this story, 1955 to 75 is nothing but Vietnam War. And I have to now discuss with you how was that the Americans got involved in Vietnam when it was actually the French who ruled Vietnam generally. So Phen Bai Chao used or not modern ideas. He used modern ideas with modern ideas. It's the Cold War politics. It in a way will bind up everything. Whatever I've written on the PPT, 5%, 10% if it makes sense. I would like to read you the story out of the French. I want to reach till Ho Chi Minh, and then I'll talk to you about after what Ho Chi Minh, what happened. Can we discuss it? Okay. Yes. Okay. As I said, this is our insurance policy. Don't have to go into too much detail here. Just remember basic things. Okay. So, initial effort, Chao, Vietnamese National Party, Ho Chi Minh, the 45 revolution, as I'll tell you, Indo-China War, Vietnam War. This is basically the story. But let's talk about them first. Initial effort started with the local officers refusing to obey the French government. Person Phan Dinh Phung, a scholar who fought for the Vietnamese for their independence, but rebellion will collapse as soon as he will die. And as it is restorative, so it makes no sense that even if he won, it made no sense. The person Chao, he is the father of modern nationalism in Vietnam. He was a prominent person, a very important very important personality with a very important idea that going against the old traditionalist outlook, he believed that we reject French rule, but we do not reject modern sciences, science and technology, and Western ideas. So his idea was that we take the Japanese or the Chinese help to get Vietnamese independence. And he will operate quite a lot, quite well. He will send very young Vietnamese to Japan to learn political propaganda, how to do clandestine organizations. He will even open a school called the Free School of Tonkin in 1907, where he was talking about anti-French activities also. and mass demonstrations. There were multiple moments in which the protest became very big for the French to manage also. And therefore, by 1908, it makes sense that Chow was actually becoming popular and was actually becoming, in a way, very essential to the story itself. However, France was very, very heavy-handed when it came to the way they managed Fan Bai Chao. Most of them were given death sentence. Some of them were deported to South China Sea, small islands. And Fan Bai Chao will be picked up in Shanghai, and he will die in house arrest in 1940. So his story was not able to go forward because the French were very heavy-handed on his movement. Thereafter, in the interwar period, it was the Vietnamese National Party, which was founded in 1927, which will very simply talk about mutinies, terrorist action, whatever you want to call it. And it was about infiltration or units in or way to go into the military, which was Vietnamese, and make them mutiny against the French overlords. They will be able to do it in Tonkin, a place called Yen Bai. So on the February of 9/10, 1930, the troops of one garrison in Tonkin will kill their French officer. It's basically 1857, but it will be suppressed very, very heavy-handedly. Wave of repression will follow. Thousands will sent to prison camps, and Vietnamese National Party will be literally destroyed. And now one thing is very, very clear, that now somebody has to change their approach, and that is going to be this person called Ho Chi Minh. He will find, or he will be the founding father of the Indo-Chinese Communist Party in 1929. He will then start to talk about Vietnam as one unit under communist rule, and his struggle will start in 1930 with a little bit of help, or basic idea based on USSR. And the French will lose little bit of control over certain areas because of Ho Chi Minh also. But before I talk about Ho Chi Minh, I want to consolidate, because I can see the expression on your face. See, Fan Ding Fung, Fen Bai Chao, Vietnamese National Party, and you have Yen Bai Mutiny. I know you don't care about the Vietnamese, so it may seem boring, but you just have to remember these four names. Can you do that? Can you do that? Okay. And all of these are failures. It never worked. He is the one who's linked to modern nationalism, mutiny based restorative. Okay. Now, now, I don't know, Vivek, why you're writing Saudi Arabia question mark. We are in a different part of country itself, or world of the world itself. I don't know why Saudi Arabia is in your mind. Okay. What was the name of dynasty? Nguyen. 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 Don't worry about them. Okay. Can I move forward? Talk about Ho Chi Minh and we end this. Okay. Well, Sakshi, nothing better. Now, Ho Chi Minh, Ho Chi Minh he starts his struggle in 1930-31, and basic point is communist based workers and people's demonstrations and revolts. But it was very clear that between 1930 and 39, no real progress, because the French are in a way, very, 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 very powerful. However, 1939 onwards, the Communist Party starts to gain. Can anybody tell me why? Very good, very good, very good. Civil movement, Mao Zedong. At 1939, it says. When did I say Mao Zedong, civil movement? When did I say these things? Yes, very good. The French lost initially in the Second World War. This is a very important point I'm developing. I want to see what is the thought process, root level participation. French lost initially in World War II. See, between 1939 and 40, by June of 1940, the French surrendered. Didn't they? Come on, bring the stories together. If you already know the initial story, the main story, then why are you not bringing these things together? You know the story of the Second World War? That was the whole point of doing the Second World War. That very simply, the French will surrender, the Hitler will basically break the back of the French, and therefore, what will happen is Ho Chi Minh will use the Second World War to expand and control the different parts of Vietnam. So it's a very simple story. Struggle keeps on going, and once the French or in a way lost control over the maritime trade, once the French got literally destroyed by Hitler, the Ho Chi Minh movement or Viet Minh was now able to, the communist movement was able to expand in Vietnam. Anybody has any issue in understanding this? This is why I told you Vietnam is a good example, because things will start to intersect now. Anybody has any issue here? Be honest. Tell me if it is making sense or not making sense. No issue. Okay. Now, very simply, if this is Vietnam for you, this is Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. There's a very big problem. Whilst in 1939-41 period, if Vietnam, more or less north, south, even parts of Cambodia and Laos were coming under Minh, someone is going to now become a problem for Ho Chi Minh. Who is going to be that someone? Come on. Use your understanding. Very good. Japan. What Japan will do is they will enter this sector. And very simply, while Ho Chi Minh will be able to hold on to North Vietnam, this area Ho Chi Minh will be able to do it. He will be able to hold on. The Japanese will very simply take over the southern sector. So the problems of Vietnam is that every time they're doing something, there is certain intervention. So while Ho Chi Minh was able to capture both north and south and basically have control over the whole sector, once the Japanese push through in this area, they will create a ruckus for Ho Chi Minh, and Ho Chi Minh, though will be able to capture north, southern sector will go into the hands of the Japanese. And now one thing is very clear, between 42 to 45, Japanese hold southern Vietnam, and the Vietnamese Communist Party controls north. But in 1945, something is going to happen. Something is going to happen. What is that? Very good. The Americans will drop two very big bombs, and Japan will surrender. Now, Ho Chi Minh had an opportunity. Ho Chi Minh had an opportunity. So while in north and south, he had an opportunity, and the opportunity was seized also. Ho Chi Minh very quickly moved to the southern sector to make sure that before Japanese leave fully, he takes control. Logical move. Logical move. So it's something like how your siblings do it when they have to take a couch or a certain type of seat. Even before you get up, they're standing there. But as soon as you get up, they will sit there. So Ho Chi Minh was that person who was eagerly waiting the Japanese. Do bam gir gaye. Now you have Hiroshima, Nagasaki. You have to go. So do one thing, give it to me. And here the Japanese actually were considerate. Here the Japanese were actually considerate. They gave power to Ho Chi Minh also. But now will come the villain of the world, Britain. Yes, it is basically Delhi Metro. It is basically Delhi Metro. Wherein once the war is won, have the French lost or they won? Have they won or lost? They won it. Now what happens is that China is given the task of removing the Japanese from the north. So China is also communist. So they have a little bit of a soft spot for Ho Chi Minh. So Ho Chi Minh is able to retain north. But Britain is given the task of removing the Japanese from the south. And like a very good big brother, these two bastard powers, which is Britain and France, Britain will remove the Japanese and bring back French control. Very simply, Britain will restore this colony back to the French. And what Britain does is French power is restored by the British. Well, the question why you've asked means that you're innocent. Because when it comes to their own interest, they all are the same. They are literally the biggest hypocrites in the world. Understand this point. Britain felt bad for the French. अरे निवाला खींच लिया यार. The food was taken away from their mouth. Japanese took the French sector. how will these French survive without Indochina? So Britain said, you come here. If I remember well, this was yours, take it. So again, the people's movement, the people's mandate was ignored. People's mandate was ignored. And now Ho Chi Minh somehow is back to square one. The power was transferred to or by the Japanese, but the concept was Japanese will now do anything because of the bomb. So the Japanese were told by the British that don't give power to Ho Chi Minh, give it to the French. I'm sending the French. High level of nepotism that we are sending the French, give the power to the French. UN was a joke? Yes, UN was a joke. UN is a literal joke. I'll show you the real joke is coming soon, don't worry. So, very simply, Ho Chi Minh did not do anything, was not able to do anything initially. And once the French surrendered, he was able to capture power. But the Japanese created this North-South divide. And thereafter, once it came to the surrender, the French were restored this colony back. Anybody has any issue in understanding this? Because this happens everywhere and we've seen it ourselves. No issue. Now you see. I'll just bring this story till this point for you. So we know that he was trying to establish control, but French were having unparalleled wave of terror at that point of time. In 1940, the French defeated and the Japanese moved into Indochina. Any uprising was brutally crushed by the Japanese. This wiped out communist movement in South. Ho Chi Minh moved to the north. Ho Chi Minh established a league for the independence of Vietnam, which is called Viet Minh. And thereafter, in what is called the August Revolution, by 1945, Japanese defeat was imminent. Minh decided to use this opportunity to take control before the French could return. Viet Minh forces and supporters took Hanoi, Saigon, and most of the large cities. Viet Minh or Ho Chi Minh proclaimed Republic of Vietnam in September of 1945, which is what is called the August Revolution for them. We also have the August Revolution, 1942, quit India. However, when it came to the Potsdam Conference in 1945, we already discussed the Cold War politics of the Potsdam Conference. Japanese needed to be evicted from Indochina. So Japan could be evicted through the Chinese in the north and the combined forces of the UK and the French in the south. Britain now used the Japanese forces in the south to recover the colony for France and destroy the Viet Minh. And the Chinese forces, however, supported the Viet Minh. So China helped Ho Chi Minh to hold on to Vietnam, while UK, along with the British literally gave the French this colony back. And now comes the painful 1955, or rather 1945 to 55 period. In this 10 years, we will have what are called the Indo-China Wars, which is Ho Chi Minh versus the French. In this 10 years, there for 8 years, bloody battle will be there. And finally, in 1955, Viet Minh and Ho Chi Minh won. Do you want this story to end here? It seems that the story should be ending here, 1955, and the Vietnam North and South should be united. North and South should be united. This has already been a very, very, very long war. They were very simply having control since 1940. It's taken them 15 years. But now, America will ask somebody, Ho Chi Minh, what party does he support? They will say communist. And America will now start to do the Tandem, which is called Vietnam Wars. Which is that when this war was going to end, there was a conference which happened in Geneva. At the Geneva conference, two things were decided. That yes, Indo-China war winner is Ho Chi Minh, but we'll do two things. We'll have free and fair elections to decide if people want to be part of Viet Minh or Communist Party. Now do you get the politics? Free, fair election. भाई साउथ से पूछ तो लो. Ask the South if they want to be part of the North or not. And now America is going to start to do drama. What America will do, America will install a person called DIM. थोड़ा DIM था भी, हल्का सा, little bit DIM. They will appoint DIM. And DIM was, he said that I am the real democratic ruler, leader of Vietnam, and I have control over South. This is standard deja vu moment, standard what happens. And now, in the name of protecting democracy, the US will start to fight a war with Viet Minh, or what we call as Viet Cong. Viet Cong was the army. The US, under Geneva Agreement, what they did was that they removed Laos and Cambodia from Vietnam because they realized that if Vietnam becomes a very big country, it will be a problem. So divide it. So Laos and Cambodia are created. No free and fair elections are taken. And they will now literally start to do drama by saying that no, we know that he's a communist. They will start to use multiple modern weaponry. So USSR will say communist, comrades for life. And now the USSR will start to supply very modern weaponry to the Viet Minh and the Viet Cong. And you see how Cold War politics has now somehow got Vietnam again fully destabilized. And you were saying, what is the UN? India, most of Southeast Asia, half of the world said to the UN that US is doing wrong. But you think that this dog was going to bark on its owner? The UN did not do anything. There were multiple resolutions introduced in the UNGA. Nothing happened. But the point was that US had no idea how to fight a war in a terrain of Vietnam. They started in South. Their thing was we will liberate North. They never crossed major cities in South itself. Because what the Viet Cong was very good in doing was guerrilla warfare, using the damp, marshy terrain of the Vietnam sector to basically undercut what the Americans were doing. Americans were not prepared for malaria, they were not prepared for dengue, they were not prepared for marshy terrain, and very simply for wildlife. And this is the only war which the US fought other than the First and the Second World War, in which it was not protected by the British in a way, but it was the only war which was fought independently by them, and they lost this war. And what will happen is that in 1975, America will realize that they're not able to hold on. Viet Cong is going to become very powerful. They will sweep over into the southern sector. And after they will enter into the southern sector, the people will rejoice Ho Chi Minh's unification of North and South Vietnam. And in a very dramatic fashion, the Americans will leave this sector And finally, in 1975, Vietnam will get independence. Can I tell you this story through the PPT? And we can end our course tonight. Yes? Done? Okay. So, the elections of 19 of rather 1 second. The war, the Indochina War started, yes, started. French eventually defeated in 1954, 8 years of bitter warfare. North was declared independent. Geneva Agreement, Laos, Cambodia were independent. 17th parallel divided North and South. Union of Vietnam will be decided by elections in 1956. France had no intentions to give North full independence and rather wanted to destabilize complete independence of Vietnam. So, in the elections of 1956, in which Viet Minh was expected to win, that never materialized because of Cold War politics. US backed person Go Din Dim, a nationalist and anti-communist, proclaimed Vietnam Republic in South in 1955, made himself president also. Minh received aid from USSR and China, and now there will be a proper Cold War inspired battle. The National Liberation Front was established in 1960, which will fight in different contexts itself. They demanded democratic national coalition government for unified Vietnam itself. Guerrilla warfare will start. Go's popularity will start to fall also because he started to now act like a dictator. And Viet Cong was now able to set up certain areas and supports in the south also. And the proclaimed intention of the British was to protect the people of Vietnam from communism, but the people knew who Ho Chi Minh was, had to strengthen the resolve against the Viet Cong. The British, the Americans fought for democracy. The US did not abide by Geneva Convention to hold elections. The UN came under a lot of international criticism for not doing anything against the US, and all of us, India and a lot of different countries, criticized the UN, understood the futility of it itself. Protracted warfare led to ceasefire in 1973. US withdrew its troops from both North and South, and the 17th parallel frontier was removed. Viet Cong now went for an offensive, took back one of the biggest cities, Saigon, and Vietnam was unified. In the same year, communist governments were established in Laos and Cambodia. Now, I know you would be looking at me that why did we do this? The point is, it's an insurance policy. You don't need to remember any of this. Now I want you to do something, which is you need to do previous year questions. Look at previous year questions with me. I want to give you strategy and I want to discuss module by module what you need to do. Half an hour which we have, I want to put it into that context in that sense. So very straightforward concept, very straightforward concept. Did this make sense? See, in a way, the course is over. The course is over. With this, we finish the course, which is that we started in 1774. We started in 1492. I brought you till 1975. Within this, we've done American Revolution, French Revolution, unification of Germany, Italy. We've done Industrial Revolution. We've done World War One, World War Two. We've done colonization, decolonization, and Cold War. And in a way, you see all of them are actually intersecting in that regard. Now, the point is, if you are at 50, 55, 60, 70, you need revision. And that will only be done once you read the PPTs again. But if you understand it, it is at the end of the day, as we came to 1992 disintegration, if you try to understand it, it's all a story of two things: nationalism and colonization, decolonization. Our story starts with colonization. We do economic nationalism, political nationalism, cultural nationalism. Then we do the rotten nationalism, we do ultra nationalism, and then we discuss Cold War based nationalism. And thereafter, colonization, decolonization tells you how this Cold War, World War One, World War Two impacted different countries. The point is that this is a long story, obviously, very long story, close to 500 years I've discussed with you. But the simple straightforward point is nobody wants to remember you the facts. No, don't need to remember the facts. Need to understand cause and significance, which I will tell you. And this is the basic thing which you need to do. This last 45 minutes, all discussion to introduce you to Vietnam. If you don't want to learn it, totally your call. But I've done it as a form of my satisfaction that if UPSC loses their mind, at least you know Vietnam. If all of this is okay, can we look at the previous questions? And then you will realize, yes, the questions also reflect that type of understanding. Okay. Revision obviously is necessary. Without that, nobody can remember nothing. Doom dam sab barabar ho jayega. Everything will become the same. So don't worry about that. Just revise. Just revise. That is that. Okay. Let's talk about the questions. Right. Now you look at the questions, you tell me. Why can't China be asked? So basically, it's the equivalent of the Chinese asking in their UPSC, tell us the story of the Indian National Congress. And I think you know which type of relationship we have with China. So if you really want to read, I'll be happy to give you books to read on Chinese Revolution. Totally your call. But it's of no purpose to me here. That's the basic point. Okay. Now, the first question says, and one of you emailed me this question also, examine how the foundations of the modern world were laid by the American and French Revolution. Now, prima facie, tell me, can the facts go into this? Can the course go into this? Can it go in that context? No? Because this question is not asking you about this course, it's not asking you about the events. What is basically asking you is the significance. This question is a significance question. Now, let's do one thing. Let's try to understand something. When we talk about modern world, what are the values which modern world embody? What are the values? Just read the preamble and you will get it. Liberty, democracy, fraternity, secularism, freedom, republic, equality, people's power, as many words as you want to use, totally your call. If I mix all of this, it is then believed that basically the modern world is made on this only, right? Pratyaksha, I'll tell you how to write an introduction. So this is first, we need to agree. These are the values on which modern world is based on. Now Pratyaksha is asking how to write an introduction for this. Introduction is going to be very straightforward. The modern world as we know it today is based on certain principles which we value. These principles are, for example, republic, liberty, democracy, fraternity, secularism, freedom, equality, and people's power. However, these values are not given, but were a product of two very important revolutions in the world, those being the American and the French Revolution. That is what the question is asking you. Let's get the introduction. The introduction is to basically create the context. The context or the historical context is always the introduction. Now you will say American Revolution gave to us democracy, liberty, the concept of economic nationalism, representation. It also told us what is the importance of secularism because religious freedom was very important for them, people's power. You can link whatever value you want to link with the American Revolution and then go to the French Revolution. The French Revolution gave to the world the Republic, though you can link it to the American Revolution rather more, fraternity, freedom, equality, declaration of right of man and citizen was truly the reason why all constitutions have the same ideals, from the concept of equality before law, from equal opportunity, everything came out of this concept, mother of all constitutions. Now if you know basically the significance of these events, this question is not difficult. This question is not difficult, it just needs application. Let's look at the next question. Now you tell me, can you answer this question or not? But this part is the more tricky part. Why did the Industrial Revolution first occur in England? Discuss the quality of life of the people during the industrialization phase. Not a single word like that came out of Indian movement. So actually Indian movement is late. These things already happened. We added other words, Swaraj, Atma Shakti. That's a separate issue altogether. So you can answer this, you can answer this, which is social impact and why. But the last part is the tricky part. How does it compare with that of India at present? 2015 question. Now here this issue is at present. Now what a lot of you will do is that you will not find a balance, which is, see, the question says, how is the quality of life of the people during the British Industrial Revolution? Bad, slums, working condition, bad. How does it compare with India in 2015, 2020, 2023? It is not that bad, but it is equatable. It is comparable because we still have issues of inequality, poverty, and we have issues of wealth, what we call as wealth distribution, the issues related to slums, the issues related to child labor, bonded labor. But don't go and literally criticize the government of India that you are useless. You will, however, last line which you will add in the conclusion is, however, the Indian government through its various schemes has been and is working to make sure that these conditions are changed. This is a very important line because if you become too radical in writing this answer, that is also not something which is good. So don't go each extremes. No, India is perfect or India is totally imperfect. Say there are issues, but we are trying to resolve them as a young nation. Are you getting my point? How do you basically balance this type of problem when it comes to? Yes? Okay. How to rationalize the answer? Yes, this is called rationalization. Moderate approach. As a UPSC aspirant, you want to be a government servant. So can't abuse the government before you enter it and say that everything which the government is doing is wrong, which a lot of you tend to develop over the period of your what we call as not even journey, but basically as you read more, you will start to pick up things which you should not talk about as a aspirant when you're writing in the examination. I am not asking you to not have an opinion, but don't say that everything which the government of India does is problematic. Balanced approach is important. The paper checker also knows that there are issues in India. The board also knows that there are issues in India. Don't be the one to say, I am the one who will tell everyone that there's a problem in India. Understand this point. As constitutional lawyers, understanding polity, as governors of RBI, understanding economics, understanding social issues, and very simply understanding 15, 16, 29, 30 very well, you will start to develop this tendency. And I want to stop it here itself. So this question is basically a litmus test. It's a litmus test. That does the candidate actually believe in government? That is the basic point. Are you getting my point? Why not to go the other route, which is very dangerous? I'm not the first one. I will not be the last one. But I'm trying to tell you one thing. Take a middle path. All your personal understanding of India should be kept aside till your name does not come in the rank list and you have been allocated a service. After that, whatever you want to do, join Instagram and talk about anything and everything as happens in podcasts. That's a separate issue altogether. Yes. So till you don't become an IPS officer, IAS officer, IFS officer, don't be an India China specialist in your hostel, in your city. Don't do that. Just clear the exam and then be the real person with regards to that. So keep it. I'm not saying that don't criticize. Keep your answer middle path. Yes. Agreed, don't agree, that's your problem. If you don't agree, then you will not get marks. That's the basic point. Middle path. That is what is the solution. Can I take the next set of questions? Okay. Now, look at this question. Latecomer industrial revolution in Japan involved certain factors that were markedly different from what West had experienced. Can criticize in private space with friends, sure. But what you do every day, you will do it. It will become second skin. But totally your point. If you really want to go outboard and do it, totally your call. Okay. Reverse engineering, technical education, Latecomer advantage, very good, straightforward. Okay. So this question is basically looking for 4 to 5 words. Meiji restoration, it is looking for Latecomer advantage, it is looking for Zaibatsu, technical education, reverse engineering, import export. So basically they've already asked this question, which is what is the Latecomer advantage, which they had. Okay. Now, American Revolution was an economic revolt against mercantilism. Now, can anybody tell me what this question is asking you? Is it asking you cause or significance? Asking you cause or significance? Cause. It's basically asking you American Revolution was economic revolt against mercantilism. Mercantilism is exploitation through trade. That is what was happening. Talk about the Navigation Acts. Then talk about how Stamp Act was the line crossed. And thereafter, every act which happened was an economic revolt. So you can see the questions are not asking you facts. They're asking you implications. This will go further. You will see. The anti-colonial struggles in West Africa were led by new elite of Western educated Africans examined. This is why I ask you to remember Jomo Kenyatta, Nawami Kurume, and these people, Azikwe. Because this question, first part is straightforward. Decolonization happened through national movement, standard protest, this and that. But you have to sprinkle certain names. 150-word answer. Those answers, names need to be remembered. As I said, since 2016, we've not seen a question. So Africa, they've moved away. There are two very interesting questions which I want to discuss, this and these two. These again, Africa was chopped into states artificially created by accident of European competition. There's nothing but scramble for Africa. Scramble for Africa. This is the question basically. That it was an accident of European competition, scramble, chopped artificially. Berlin Conference, 1884. That is what you have to write. Now, you see, 2015. To what extent can Germany be held responsible for causing the two world wars? Discuss critically. Now, World War One and World War II. Can we say that World War I was fully the responsibility of Germany? No, Avni, no, say no. Serbia plus tendencies and Germany got caught up in that regard. World War II, yes, fully responsible. Hitler was single-handedly responsible for the Second World War. Now, if you write yes and yes, then basically what you're doing is being a Britisher. So don't do that. Don't say that the Germans are responsible for everything. Basically, then what's the difference between you and the Treaty of Versailles? War guilt clause, but when I told you the tendencies, I am giving you a larger perspective. I'm talking about Moroccan crisis. I'm talking about Balkan wars. I've been talking about the fact that how Serbia basically triggered it. Then don't forget these simple subtleties. These are called nuance in that regard. Now then UPSC chose to be very creative in 2014. What were the major political, economic, and social developments in the world which motivated anti-colonial struggles in India? Now, basically, what this question has done has linked modern India with world history. Now, you need to find intersections, and this tests your knowledge of both modern India and world history. This is the type of question which are going to come now. So, let's go period by period. Political, economic, social things which impacted anti-colonial struggle in India. And it's totally on your ingenuity and your memory how many you can remember. But let's start with First and Third Carnatic War, Austrian War of Succession, 7 Years War. Thereafter, Napoleon and the issue related to the Mysore War. Thereafter, French presence generally was the reason of the Maratha Wars, the first Maratha War, and the second Maratha War was related to how the Marathas were becoming more close to the French. Thereafter, we can talk about the Rowlatt Act, First World War. 1857 is linked to the larger concept of global revolts which were also happening. We can talk about the political from First World War, Rowlatt Defense of India Act, to First World War, to 1942 to 1940, from the surrender of France to the Japanese onslaught, to quit India, to Mazzini, to Garibaldi, to HSRA, to Russian Revolution, whatever you want to write. Whatever you want to write. Rashmi, the question is basically asking you, what are the world events which impacted modern Indian events? So, very simply, you can go chronologically or whatever you want. Economic movements, Industrial Revolution, there is a word limit. That is the biggest issue. 250 words. Writing an answer is the real problem here because there are too many events. So it's about what you have to give at least two to three example of each. Political, I would say it would be better to give the later part, which is First World War, Second World War. That is better. Economic, Industrial Revolution, the American Civil War, and the process of deindustrialization, very good. Commercialization of agriculture, again for Industrial Revolution. Social development would be the white man's burden, utilitarianism, the Orientalist issue. Everything was coming from the British sector or from the larger things which were happening in Europe. So very simply, this question is not a question of intellect. It is the question of understanding. It is testing your ability to understand modern and world. That is the type of questions which come here. And that is why the latest question which came in 2021 or rather 2022 was that how was the interwar period a period of or a period in which democracies were threatened? So the threatening of democracy comes from whom in the interwar period? Comes from whom? Very good. Hitler, Mussolini, Great Depression, linked to it, Nazism, fascism. See, Himanshu, doesn't matter how many marks are assigned to it. You're doing the prelims type of concept. Give me options, I'll give you the answer. That doesn't matter here. You can't write more than 250. In these type of questions, you will struggle to write within 250. See, based on this discussion, I want to do two things with you before we end for today. And most probably I'll see you for World History morning batch in October end. Can I give you first approach and second the concept of module by module understanding? Prerequisite to good answer writing is wholesome knowledge, wholesome understanding, contemplation. Devans, that is easier said than done. Prerequisite to good answer writing is linking topics, linking facts, having a basic idea of that, and using your base knowledge better. There is nobody who can learn each and every topic in UPSC. So you need to have an idea how to link things. Can we, sir, can we phrase the first social, economic, then political? Sure, that is totally point. Now, can I talk about approach? What to do with all this information I've given you over 10 days? Can I talk about that first? You have to be clear here. Module 8 and 10 were complicated, difficult. Module 1, 7 easy. Yeah, you have to just revise. Okay. PPT is sufficient. No, don't have to go anywhere now. See, what I want to do, or what I want you to do right now is, next 2-3 days, once revise world history. What I want you to do is that you go through these 10 modules, go through the annotated PPT ones. Once you're done that, it will take you maximum 1 day, 2 day. Once you've done that, then you take the folder called world history, close it, and then put it aside. Because world history is only relevant after prelims. Your task and the approach to do world history is once a month. Once a month, revise world history. Take out the PPTs, go through the PPTs, and that's it. Can you do it till the prelims examination? Once a month. And as soon as prelims is over, you will start to revise twice or thrice daily. Not daily, weekly. After prelims. Basically, these 35 hours which you put in with me, I've tried to do two things. First, I've tried to give you an understanding of the West, of world politics. So I hope that you understand world politics better. This is the first thing which you've done, which I've tried to do, which I've always tried to push into you. Second is, with this understanding of world history, your IR understanding should increase and your current affairs understanding should increase. You should now be able to understand current affairs better, because somebody who says, for example, Iron Curtain, somebody who says that this is Cold War 2.0, somebody who says that this looks like Vietnam War, somebody who says, for example, Operation Barbarossa was such a major point. The point is, these things, these words, American Revolution, French Revolution, Robespierre, Louis XVI, for example, unification Germany, Bismarck, Cavour, Barbarossa, Normandy, Dunkirk, the Sarajevo crisis, Gavrilo Princip. These things should now have certain meaning for you. Just because you should not forget everything within, because you will forget over a period of time. Once a month, just open the PPTs and go through them. That should be enough till the prelims examination. Our task was not to learn it right now, because it will be a waste of your time. Rather, keep your foundation strong, so that after the examination, if you do it, then it should not seem as who was Hitler, who is Cavour. It should be familiar to you. So if you understand the approach, then I want to tell you what to emphasize in each module, if that is what we can do now, and end the class in that regard. That is totally your call. If you want to take out printouts of annotated PPT, not PPT, that is totally your call. Okay. Now, let's do it. Let's do it. See. Module 1, Module 2, Module 3. Module number 1, American Revolution. Module number 2, French Revolution. Module number 3, unification of Germany and Italy. Now, what do we expect in this type of unit, American Revolution? Cause, significance, connection with French Revolution. French Revolution, again, cause, significance, role of Napoleon, in stabilizing the French. Unification of Germany, Italy. Role of Napoleon, Metternich, Bismarck, and Carbon. Now, looking at this slide, does anybody have any issue in understanding what I'm trying to say here? These are the basic things which you need to emphasize on. And looking at this, does now world history actually seem to be a little bit elusive, a little bit scary? I hope that is not the case now. So, very simply, you have to just revise once and you will be able to write any of these answers. Right? Now, let's go to the next set. Next set is module number 4, module 5, module 6. Now, very important point, as some of you will not remember, 7th October, we have a doubt session next Saturday, 8 to 11:30, and you can send your doubts to islive@byju's.com. Vis-a-vis write world history doubt, that will be enough. Now, module 4 is Industrial Revolution. This is Eastern question and World War One. This is World War One. Here you have why Britain, why Europe, in Europe, social impact and general impact. Thereafter, Eastern question. What is Eastern question? And out of these two, you can get causes of First World War, significance or impact of First World War. Thereafter, module number 7, 8, 9. Module. Module number 7 is Russian Revolution and ideologies. Grishma, there is no one book for the whole of this. All in one book for history. For modern Indian history, for Indian history, I can recommend my book. Now it's available on Amazon also. It's available on Amazon, Ancient, Medieval, Modern in one book. It is there. World history, there's no one book. You have Russian Revolution ideologies. You have World War II, Road to. Name, please. I'll just tell you the name. What is the book title? Okay, one second. But you have to buy it yourself. It's totally between you and me. Yes, it's called UGC Net History Paper 2. Write it on Amazon. It will show two names, Shubhangini Priya and Abhishek Mishra. I'm the co-author. She is my wife, Shubhangini Priya. So, UGC Net History Paper 2, Amazon, it's available. This will have ancient, medieval, modern India in one. It's already discounted. It's 699 is coming at 560, 600 also. So totally your call. It's totally between you and me. It is not compulsory, totally your thing. World history, there's no one book. That is the biggest issue. This can be your alternative to Spectrum, can be an alternative to Poonam Daya. As it is, she has 3 books because ancient medieval is different and your modern is different. And you can use this book. UGC Net, which is basically an assistant professor examination, is a bigger examination. The way the book has been written is because she's a specialist of UGC Net, I'm a specialist of UPSC. So you can just go through it and you will realize any question, the revision for ancient, medieval, modern can be done from this only. This is totally your call and this is totally your thing. I've given you the name. You can just very simply go on Amazon and check it out. Because you asked for one book, that is why I'm giving you this name. UGC NET History Paper 2, Amazon. Type my name, but my name is very, very common. Abhishek, Rahul, Priya are standard names in the world. So it's, yeah. So, okay. Himanshu's already sent the link in the group. Okay. You have module number 8, which is Road to Second World War. This is Second World War and Cold War politics. Himanshu's, I hope it is mine only. It is. I made it public for everyone if you want. Okay. World War II and Cold War politics. Now, these are internally linked to each other also. These are internally linked to each other also. Here you will get two type of questions. Causes of Russian Revolution, and thereafter you will get significance. But basically significance is nothing but the reason of the Second World War. Here you will again get cause and impact, and that is basically Cold War. Here you will get two type of questions. High points of Cold War politics, which is nothing but Berlin blockade, Berlin Wall crisis, Cuban Missile crisis. And thereafter, the second type of question may be why détente, which is nothing but China. So very simply, these are the interconnected topic, which is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They all are linked to each other. Cause, significance, cause, impact. Each are each other's cause and impact in that regard. Last but not the least, module number 10, which UPSC is now started to forget. You have Africa, in which you can get standard, scramble, and decolonization. And we all pray to God that UPSC does not go, but we've already done Indochina, which is again story of colonization and Vietnam War context. So before I end for today, see 10 modules, very G20 Africa, sure, but Africa has been relevant for the past 10 years, but they've not asked a question. Very simple, straightforward thing. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed myself. We've laughed at the expense of the Westerners. That is the least we can do. Very straightforward point is, don't complicate it. Do not complicate it. Revise once, keep it with you. I will see you for Modern India, which is weekend and evening batch, I think. The next World History batch comes in morning, which is, I think, late October, 25th, 26th October. And ancient medieval art and culture is also coming for most of you, both in morning and evening. So there will be a little bit of an overdose of me after a certain point. But very simply, we have now covered the most technical area of history, because world history is not yours. World history is a little bit technical. So very simply, what we will do is that we will revise once, keep it simple, and follow the PPTs. So thank you. Take care. It's been a pleasure. The feedback form is with you. And I will see you again on 7th October. If you have any doubt, just articulate it. I will be happy to take it there also. Okay. We'll meet again on 7th October, and I'll try to consolidate everything. You have other issues also, how to revise and all, much bigger issues. We'll discuss that. So thank you. Take care and bye-bye. Pleasure.
हाँ जी, थैंक यू सर। तो अभी शुरू नहीं हुआ अभी तक? अरे सर अभी यहाँ यही तो शुरू करना है सर।